Hello, I'm David Mandy, President of O&M Partners. I want to welcome everyone today to the Trilogy Metals Town Hall webinar. Despite the challenges of COVID-19, Trilogy has continued to hit their milestones and maintain a strong cash position, and they're here to tell you about all the developments today. Uh, for those new to these broadcasts, O&M has become kind of the link between the investing public and the public companies. In the past times, these groups kind of passed each other like ships in the night. Our digital roadmap enables us to keep pace with the tremendous changes in investor demographics and how they receive information. We want this broadcast to answer all your questions. The questions will be easily answered by going to the question panel of GoToWebinar, or you can email us. Be assured we'll get back to you if there are any questions that remain unanswered. For those who dialed in with your phone, the only way you can hear our pre-recorded introductory presentation is on your computer speakers. If that's not possible, you'll be able to hear the main presentation after about 10 minutes, so please stay tuned. Before we turn to our host, pleasure to introduce our speaker, introductory speaker, Doug Loud. Doug is a consultant for O&M Partners and has a long history in the financial business. The executive director currently of Greystone Asset Management, which is a firm specializing in exploration and production companies involved with gold, silver, copper, plus some medical technology companies. Doug has extensive experience with options trading and foreign securities. He's co-leader of training seminar for interns and other reviewing the application of rigor for current financial markets and looking at how to decide whether or not things are what they appear to be. So on that note, I'll turn it over to Doug.
Hi there, I'm Doug Loud, speaking for Otis and Mandy today. We have a little surprise in the age of COVID. Some of the speakers often aren't able to show up when we thought they were, so I've been called in as your MC to try to talk to you today about copper. Now, a lot of you out in the audience know more about copper probably than I do. So this talk is really for the new people who are looking at metals for the first or second time and want to know more. And we're going to talk about copper. And the thing about copper is, of course, it's not romantic. It's not like gold and silver and exciting. It's just good old boring old copper. Except if you happen to do a little homework, you discover that since April, copper's gone from $2.11 to $3.50 this afternoon. So that's up a whole lot. That's 1.65 times versus gold, which certainly hasn't done that well, or silver. So you better be paying attention to copper. And we're going to talk about why copper matters, even though it's so boring. Now, copper has two problems. One is increasing use at the same time as a declining availability, and we'll touch on that. But the most important thing, if you remember nothing else about this talk, is look around your building, your house, your apartment, wherever you are. Think about all the wires in your wall, the copper. Why is it there? Because you use electricity. And a lot of this talk is going to be about electricity, because without copper, you don't have electricity in simple terms. One of the things you might want to do if you feel like reading a lot is there's a new book out called A Question of Power by Robert Bryce, B-R-Y-C-E. He talks about electricity, how we use it, different ways of producing it, do wind and solar work, do nuclear work, but it also gives you some interesting information on why electricity is so important that you may not have known about. Let's start with the use side versus the supply side, because there's some really interesting information there. First of all, you might think copper's a little boring, but just in effect, standing still, copper's usage goes up by roughly 4% a year, which means basically that even if everything stayed relatively flat, we would need a new Escondida every year. I know, you want to know what an Escondida is. Escondida is a big, huge copper mine down in Chile that produces about 5% of the world's copper every year. So think about that. We need a new mine of that size every year. And as you're going to discover in a little while, we aren't getting those. But let's talk a little more about why we need all that copper. We have growing economies. We have our own economy. The United States, as you're aware, has something called the grid that moves electricity around as we need it to where and when we need it. But our grid's a little bit old. So I want you to think about that for a minute, because here are two little facts you might not have known about. Everyone's all excited about electric vehicles. And the idea is you're going to drive your electric vehicle home, your EV, and plug it in at night. Well, maybe not so fast. I know of two situations now where nice guys bought Teslas, drove them around, plugged them in, and they worked great. So they decided they would buy Teslas for their wives. And then they discovered they couldn't do that because there were already 4 or 5 other Teslas or other electric vehicles in their neighborhoods and in their area, and their local grid would not support updating the batteries of those cars every night. So it's not so easy that we're all going to be driving electric vehicles around and saving the environment, much as we might wish to. But let's get really serious. In the rest of the world, outside of, when you start talking about the third world, the developing world, whatever you'd like to call it, they aren't interested in intellectual things like cell phones and computers. They like them. What they need is stuff. They need cars. They need refrigerators. They need air conditioners. When you buy a refrigerator and an air conditioner, you just bought 60 pounds of copper. We haven't even wired your house yet or built the substations, but we have to do that so that you can have your refrigerator and your air conditioner, whether you're in India or Indonesia. And oh, by the way, India, let's pause with them for a minute. Right now, unfortunately, there's a lot of talk about COVID and vaccines and how we need vaccines for 330 roughly million people. Did you know that there's almost that many people, 330 million people in India, who don't have electricity at all? That means a really rough lifestyle in our universe. In fact, if you like your history and you read the Robert Caro books on Lyndon Johnson, you may recall that when Lyndon Johnson was running for office in the early days in the hill country of Texas, which he was from, one of his campaign slogans was, "Vote for me, I'll get you electricity and you won't look like your mothers." What that meant to all the women in the audience and many of the men was that in those days, the women of the household spent a good part of the day carrying water in buckets from the well into the house, often up a hill, in order to have water in the house for drinking and washing and laundry and things like that. And he won on that idea that he would get them electricity, which he did do. Electricity now in our universe of internets and offline learning and things is vitally important. People have to have it and they want it. Another thing to think about is, are wind and solar going to help deliver more electricity? Well, we certainly hope so. There are some issues, such as, for the sake of argument, what's known as density, which is to say it takes a huge wind or solar farm to generate as much electricity as Big Alice, which is a generating station in New York, does, and it only takes up a couple of square blocks. On the other hand, we do need them. Hopefully they'll come along, but we like those. Solar and wind systems use a lot of copper. Furthermore, they usually aren't near the grid, so we now have to run the wires out to the grid from there. More copper. Electric vehicles, like we were talking about a minute ago, well, guess what? They use 5 to 6 times as much copper as a regular motor vehicle. We touched briefly on issues with Teslas getting repowered in local neighborhoods, but as these developing populations grow across the world, they're going to need their own grids. To give you an example, it is believed by some that by the year about 2050, I think it is, we're going to need the equivalent of 5 new grids the size of the US grid. Why? Because of these developing populations. What am I talking about? Well, let's just take Kenya, for example. I was recently there on an assignment, and between 1970 and 2020, the population of Nairobi had jumped from 250,000 to 6 million. So many people suddenly that they don't have enough water, never mind electricity for them, and they're madly scrambling to develop water production systems that can also produce electricity on a hydroelectric basis for that population. That sort of problem is happening all over the world. If you want some more fun, look up a dam called Tarbela in Pakistan. Great huge thing with 4 huge hydroelectric generating stations attached to it because the people need electricity and the politicians are promising it to them. Now, the flip side is if we're using all this copper, where is it coming from? Well, that's kind of the problem. The existing mines are getting old. And one of the things that happens when an existing copper mine starts to get old is what are known as deleterious elements start to get mixed in with the ore. Those are things like arsenic. Even some of the smelters don't want to, in China and other countries don't want to deal with smelting that kind of ore. So they've got to find new copper mines. And some years back, out of nowhere, a big smelter came along and ate a major copper project so they would have a secure source of copper. There is a silver mining company in Mexico that happened to discover that it had a seam of copper available to it. And since all of their silver production was being sold to, I believe it was a big Korean industrial firm that made solar cells, because solar cells use lots of silver, when that company found out that the mine had copper, they insisted they put in a copper line to produce the copper. Why? Because they can't get enough copper. They don't have a reliable supply. Why? Because during the last mining cycle, everyone was all excited that these big new copper mines were going to come on stream and get built, and they were going to cost like $5 or $6 billion to build and take 5 or 6 years to build. In fact, there used to be a running joke in the mining business that it took 10 years to get from discovery to the production of a real mine. Nowadays, those same projects that weren't built because they cost too much then, now are going to cost $10 to $12 billion, and they aren't going to take 5 or 6 years to build. They're going to take possibly 10 years to build, because now we have new social requirements, new social costs, permitting requirements, water requirements that make developing a new mining project much more time consuming and difficult. Also, if you pay attention to these things, you discover that a lot of these mines are in developing areas, and every once in a while something goes wrong. The miners don't like that, and they strike, and they can shut the mine down for a substantial amount of time. These are some of the problems confronting the supply of copper. So in the simplest terms we're using more and more copper every year, but we aren't in a position to supply it yet. So copper is going to go into what they call a deficit condition, which is they're using more of it than we're producing, and therefore the price of copper in theory will go up. And therefore you should be paying attention to copper and copper mining companies. I hope this has helped a little and given you a bit of a child's guide to why you want to pay attention to copper. Thank you very much for listening to me this afternoon.
Thank you, Doug Loud. Scott, am I, I'm not, okay, I thought I was echoing. Were we fine with that, Scott?
Yeah, we're good. I think, Tony, I'll have you mute just until after David's done introducing you. Thank you.
A pleasure. Now to turn to our host, Tony Giardini, excuse me. Tony's the President and Chief Executive Officer of Trilogy, has extensive experience as an executive officer and team leader. He was previously roles as president of Ivanhoe Mines, a base metals development and exploration company. Tony was also the chief financial officer at Kinross Corporation, senior gold producer. Both companies operated assets and in complex international projects at various stages of development. Tony has extensive experience with joint ventures and large capital projects, including Ivanhoe's 3 large development projects. I'll also add that prior to Kinross, he spent 10 years at Placer Dome, where he held a series of senior financial positions, including vice president and treasurer. I'm also on the call, pleased to have Pat Donnelly. Pat's the vice president, corporate communications and development. Pat has a broad range of experience, to say the least. He began his career as a project geologist 25 years ago, exploring for precious and base metals and even diamonds in Western and Northern Canada. Then Pat worked at a Canadian securities firm as a base metals mining analyst. And then he's also worked as was the president of First Mining Gold Corp, where he played a key role. And of course, now he's worked with Trilogy. So on that note, it's a real pleasure to turn the call over to you, Tony.
Great. Dave, thank you very much. I very much appreciate the opportunity to participate in this town hall with O&M Partners. And before I start, I just wanted to thank Doug for stepping in on short notice and doing a very good job of giving a strong overview of what's happening in the copper space. And I think that, what Doug was talking about in terms of not just obviously the demand side, but the supply side are really key to the story. And we have had excellent performance in copper through the current year. And in fact, as we're looking at forecasts for future price increases in the copper space, I think a number of the analysts are still lagging in terms of where they see copper. In fact, the most recent forecast I looked at indicated that most people were below the current price level. So we should see some revisions in terms of where analysts are looking at it. In fact, Goldman Sachs came out recently and they did a big overview on the copper market. And we're certainly talking about copper hitting the $10,000 a ton level, which is a level it hasn't seen since 2011. So I think we're looking forward to a very strong copper market for the next couple of years and obviously beyond that. So with that as an initial introduction, let me tell you a little bit about myself and Trilogy, and I'll get into the discussion and leave hopefully enough time for questions. I am the president and CEO. I joined Trilogy in June of this year, but prior to that, I had been associated with Trilogy since the company was spun out of NovaGold in 2012, where I have been a director of the company since 2012. So I'm very well versed in how the company has gotten to where it is today. The company itself, Trilogy, is traded on the Toronto and New York Stock Exchange under the ticker symbol TMQ. Copy of this presentation will be available online on our website, trilogymetals.com. I encourage you to have a look at the website and have a look at the information that we have, not just with respect to this presentation, but the Ambler Mining District and the team, including the board of directors at Trilogy. So what I'm going to be talking about today is the Ambler Mining District and our interest in that district, and really focusing on the 3 points that are indicated on this cover slide. The high-grade nature of the deposits that we have, the great jurisdiction that we're fortunate to operate in terms of being in a tier 1 jurisdiction, and the solid partnerships that we have with South 32, NANA, and ADA. And I'll get into the specific details on all of those things, and so let's get started. In terms of the first slide here, slides 2 and 3 are forward-looking statements, and just highlighting that I will be making comments that would be considered forward-looking statements, and just want to advise the listeners of that. In terms of our first overview slide, Trilogy has a 50% interest in the Ambler Mining District. So the Ambler Mining District is a district that's been known for a number of years. In fact, deposits there were discovered in the 50s, and there's been significant exploration performed in the district over the years. And we're talking about having discovered about 8 billion pounds of copper, 3 billion pounds of zinc, and over 1 million ounces of gold. And so in total, I believe there's been about $150 million spent in exploration in the district. But it hasn't been until the last several years that we put ourselves in a position to really advance the development of this exciting district located in the great state of Alaska. So what we're talking about here is high-grade copper. We're talking about the state of Alaska and a strong rule of law, but also very good skills in the state of Alaska, a rich mining history, and an understanding of what it takes to allow projects to move forward. We're going to discuss our 50-50 JV with South 32. They're one of our partners. And I want to talk about the significant exploration upside in the district. We have 2 advanced projects. One is a development project, the Arctic project, which contains 43.4 million tons, grading approximately 4.2% copper equivalent. And then we have a bornite deposit, which is an advanced exploration project, 6 billion pounds of copper and 77 million pounds of cobalt, with roughly 180 million tons, grading about 1.6% copper. In terms of how the company's capitalized, we're in a very good position. We've got at the corporate level about $12.8 million in cash. We don't have any debt. I'll be talking about the JV, and the JV was formed this year. It holds about $145 million of cash. So when we look at it, on a 50% basis, our share of that cash would effectively be $72.5 million. So when you take the cash position that we have at the corporate level and our share of the joint venture cash, it totals approximately $85 million. So against our market cap of 283 when this presentation was put together, it would imply an enterprise value of about $200 million. We've got significant major shareholders. Electrum, Baupost, and Polson have been shareholders since the company was spun out of Nova Gold in 2012. South 32 has an 11.5% interest as well. And Neuberger Bergman also acquired a significant stake in the company over the last several years. In addition, management owns a sizable investment in the company, and there have been significant increases in management holdings in the last several months. In fact, personally, I have added 375,000 shares to my holdings in the last 2 months, with 200,000 shares purchased in the open market recently. So we feel we're in a strong financial position, and we're in a strong position to advance the projects that I'm going to be discussing. In terms of our partnerships, there's 3 key partnerships that I want to discuss, and and I'm going to cover them off in order. Firstly, South 32, secondly, NANA, and lastly, but very importantly, the state of Alaska and ADA. In terms of our partnership with South 32, South 32 has invested approximately $200 million in Trilogy and the Ambler Mining District so far. They invested $145 million to acquire a 50% interest in the district. And with that investment, we formed a new company called Ambler Metals LLC. That company is domiciled in Anchorage, and we have a new management team that is overseeing that company. All of the personnel that operated or worked for Trilogy in the past, prior to the formation of a JV, have been transferred. The Alaskan personnel have been transferred to Ambler Metals LLC, and we've got a full management team in place as they're working hard to advance the development of Arctic and advance the exploration activities in the Ambler Mining District. South 32 initially invested $30 million in the company that was spent on exploration. And once that money was spent, they had the option to acquire the 50% interest in the Ambler Mining District, which they did by contributing $145 million into the company. South 32 is a diversified mining company with its corporate office located in Perth. It has operations worldwide. It made a significant investment in North America a couple of years ago when it acquired Arizona Mining in Arizona for about $1.2 billion. And its second most significant investment in North America has been its investment in the Ambler Mining District and Trilogy. In terms of the district itself, this slide just highlights the area of interest that we're talking about. It's a large land position in the northwest part of the state, 172,000 hectares. There's 3 different color patterns on this slide, which I'll highlight. The red outline were the original mining claims that were acquired from Kennecott 2003. The green area is our claims that or land that was put into the JV by NANA, and I'll be speaking about NANA in a moment. And the blue outline is the area of interest. So anything that falls within the blue outline constitutes part of the Ambler Mining District and is part of and resides in Ambler Metals LLC. So we've got a large land position, a lot of exploration is being conducted in the area. There's a lot of prospectivity in the district. One of the challenges that Trilogy has had in the past, prior to doing this deal with South 32, is we didn't have a financial ability to be able to conduct exploration in the district. And now that we have the JV formed, we have $145 million, we're in a strong position to fund the next phase of development, probably out to 2024, possibly early 2025, depending on the level of spending that we have over the next several years. But as I said, we're in a very good position to advance exploration and development of Arctic and hopefully move Bornite further in terms of additional exploration upside. Our second partnership is with NANA. NANA is a native corporation that is based in the state of Alaska in the northwest part of the state. This is the area where NANA operates, and this is where the Ambler Mining District is. As you can see on this slide, there's a mine called Red Dog. Red Dog is the largest zinc mine in the world. It actually is has been developed by Teck in partnership with NANA. And in many ways, we're looking at Red Dog as a model as to how we want to advance the Ambler Mining District. In order for Red Dog to get into operation and production, a road was built from Red Dog mine to the sea and a port was built. And that was done through a tolling agreement with Ada. And we're looking at a similar type of arrangement in terms of building a road from the Ambler Mining District to existing infrastructure, the Dalton Highway, which would allow us ultimately to transport concentrate from the district all the way down to Anchorage, where there's an existing port. NANA has 14,000 shareholders / residents. The benefits for NANA going forward is that they will either be able to take a direct interest in mines that are developed in the Ambler Mining District, or take a net profit interest of 15% in any mines that are developed after we recoup our capital and a 9% rate of return, with the net profit interest being tax deductible. They don't have to make a decision on what their choice is until we make an investment decision to move forward with the project. As I said earlier, Red Dog is the largest zinc mine in the world, so NANA has a lot of experience in terms of the operation of mines, and we have a very strong agreement and relationship with NANA, and work closely not just with NANA but with the community as a whole. And we're obviously looking at opportunities of creating employment in the Northwest Arctic Borough, as well as generating procurement opportunities and taxes for the local community. So we're looking forward on expanding our relationship with Red Dog as the projects in the Ambler Mining District advance forward. Our third partnership is with the state of Alaska, and specifically Ada. Ada is responsible for assisting companies in terms of providing opportunities for developing infrastructure in the state of Alaska. As I mentioned earlier, Ada was instrumental in the development of a Red Dog mine by effectively building or financing the road from Red Dog to the sea and financing the port. We're looking at a similar arrangement in terms of advancing the development of the Ambler Mining District, and we're looking at the development of a 211-mile road that will connect the district to existing infrastructure. And the idea would be, once that road is in place, you'll be able to transport concentrate from the Ambler Mining District to the Dalton Highway, and then connect up to rail facilities in Fairbanks and a deep sea port that exists in Anchorage. So this road has been talked about in the state of Alaska for a long time, but through the hard work of Ada, there was a record of decision that was received earlier this year in July. The record of decision was a final permit that was required for moving the road forward. So what we're doing now is we have a memorandum of understanding with Ada to fund approximately $1 million of the detailed engineering. And we're working on an expanded MOU that would fund on a joint basis the entire detailed engineering component of the development of the mine. And from there, we would look to move into a financing construction phase once those agreements have been put in place. The second agreement that we're working on is a tolling agreement. So Ada is a very important partner in terms of advancing the project. And our relationship with Ada is managed specifically through Ambler Metals, and Ambler Metals is working very closely with Ada in terms of advancing the development of a road and getting to an agreement that works for all parties. And this is an indication of where the road, the proposed road would go. Those dots and stars and squares that are in red are all potential targets that, and some of those I'll be talking about as we discuss this project. When the road was envisioned, it was envisioned as a private industrial use road only that would be used solely for mining development. And it was envisioned that the road was there to support the development of the advanced targets in the district. Those include Arctic and bornite that are owned by Ambler Metals LLC, and the Sun Project, which is privately owned, and Smucker, which is owned by Teck. So the key, of course, is advancing these projects and putting ourselves in a position to develop the district over a reasonable time period. This is what the reserves look like at the Arctic project. The footprint of Arctic is actually quite small. It's 147 acres. As I mentioned earlier at the outset, we're talking about 43.4 million tons, grading 4.2% copper equivalent. So this is a high grade mine. And we think there's lots of opportunities to expand the resources, approximately 3.5 million tons of inferred material that haven't been included in the resource. As you can see from the grades, this is a polymetallic deposit. It's a copper, zinc, lead, gold, silver deposit. Trilogy prepared a feasibility study and released that feasibility study earlier this year. The feasibility study came after a pre-feas had been prepared in 2018, and it was a follow-up to that study. What's happened with the study work now is being provided to Ambler Metals LLC, and Ambler Metals is taking this work and following up on additional study work that's required to advance a project and put ourselves in a position to start the permitting process in terms of advancing Arctic. As you can see from this slide, which highlights all of the economics, the base case metal prices were run at the same levels as we used in the pre-feasibility study in 2018. Initial capital costs are about $905 million, with total capital costs approximately $1.2 billion. The NPV of a project on an after-tax basis, with all the assumptions that have been built into the FS, is $1.1 billion. Cash costs are 32 cents, an IRR of 27%. And a number that I like to look at, which is the capital intensity ratio, which shows what the initial capital is divided by the ton of equivalent copper, is low at $6,400. So that's at the base case metal prices. As Doug mentioned, copper's had a good year. We know that gold and silver performed well, as has zinc and lead. So when you look at actual spot prices of where prices are today, the NPV rises to $1.7 billion, and the IRR definitely goes over 30%. And in fact, the cash costs become negative. Now, as I said, with our forward-looking statements at the beginning, we don't know where the commodity prices are going to be going in the future as we advance the project, nor do we know if there's going to be some capital costs. But what we do know is that we have a strong IRR project, which has a 12-year mine life and has the potential to have an increased mine life through accessing additional deposits in the district that can be permitted and ultimately processed through the Arctic mill. There's 3 concentrates that will be produced at Arctic. They include copper concentrate, a zinc concentrate, and precious metals concentrate. Precious metals on a base case basis accounts for about 13% of revenue. If you just looked at it based on spot prices without adjusting copper and zinc, it rises to about 20%. So this mine is actually, in some respects, a small gold mine. It's going to produce about 82,000 ounces of gold equivalent production. If you converted all of the metals into gold at spot prices, it's about 450,000 ounces of gold production if you want to look at it as a gold mine. But it is very much a copper mine, and there's lots of opportunities to increase the life of this mine through exploration opportunities in the district, which I'll talk about in a minute. This is what the proposed mine looks like. The open pit to the right, tailings facility at the top left, and the production infrastructure facilities in the valley. The work that Ambler Metals LLC now is doing is expanding on the FS work that was prepared by Trilogy and looking at additional study work that needs to be done so that we can put ourselves in the best position to advance the permitting process. And where we're at is this is the expected timeline to look at permitting and construction and operation of a mine. We're expecting to start the permitting process in the middle of 2021 after the additional study work has been done. And once we've completed that permitting process, that will put us in a position to make an investment decision on the mine, assuming that all goes well with the permitting process. So feel very comfortable in terms of the permitting team. Trilogy had personnel in place that were focused on permitting. Those individuals have now moved over into Ambler Metals LLC, and that team will be built up further as necessary to advance the permitting process to put ourselves in the best position to get this project permitted and then ultimately built. In terms of the specific permits, there's one federal permit required. It's a 404 wetlands permit. The rest of our permits are state permits and borough approvals. There's no federal lands, which makes it easier to permit. And we believe we have strong support in the state. I can certainly draw your attention to a Department of Transportation press release that came out when the road was approved, where politicians in the state expressed their support for the development of the Ambler Mining District. So we think we're in a strong position to see this project move forward from a permitting point of view. As Doug mentioned, there's going to be a dearth of quality copper projects that are available to be developed in the next several years, and having a high-grade project such as Arctic puts us in a very strong position in terms of advancing the development of that project, and then from there looking at other opportunities in the district. In terms of exploration upside, we like to think of this as pearls on a string. What you can see on this slide is the area of interest, and there is Arctic, 43.4 million tons. I mentioned bornite previously, it's 180 million tons copper. And then the shaded 3 boxes are historical resources, 4 boxes are historical resources at Horse Creek, Sunshine, Shunak, and BT, that in total are about 34.5 million tons. Now, they're not at the same high grade as Arctic, and we still have a lot of work to do to see whether they can ultimately be processed through the Arctic processing facilities once they're built. But they do give us comfort that there's a lot of exploration upside in the district. In 2019, we did a VTEM survey, which was done to highlight possible targets and prospects in the district. The red circles, dots, are selected targets, and we have first priorities and second priorities, with those being the yellow dots. This is what Arctic looks like when we did this survey, so you can see it actually pops up quite nicely. This is an area called Sunshine. We did some drilling in Sunshine in 2019. We plan to return to do some additional drilling at Sunshine in 2021. You can see we've done some drilling in the outlined area, but in the area to the left, there's been no drill holes. This is what the drilling was like from 2019. Some selected drill holes, 6.54% copper, 5.77% copper, 6.1% copper. So we think we've got lots of similarities to what Arctic is like, and we're going to be very focused on getting back into this district in 2021. And in terms of the district potential, this is what's called a volcanic massive sulfide district. It's very similar to 2 well-known districts in Canada, Flin Flon and Noranda, that have had exceptionally long lives, as you can see from the slide. And we hope that we're going to have the same success in the Ambler Mining District with both Arctic and bornite. In terms of upcoming catalysts for Trilogy, as I indicated, we're focused on optimizing the feasibility study that being prepared by Trilogy, and Ambler Metals is working on that. We're working on an expanded MOU with ADA in terms of advancing the development of the Ambler Road. We're going to have an enhanced summer drilling campaign in 2021 of 14,600 meters, 7,000 meters at Arctic, and 7,600 meters at other targets. And we hope to commence the permitting of the Arctic project once the optimization of a feasibility study work has done. Before I conclude my comments, I just want to highlight bornite. We don't talk a lot about bornite, not because this is what the core looks like at bornite, but the key to bornite is really the potential that exists in the district. And as I indicated, there's a total of about 180 million tons at an average grade between the indicated and inferred of 1.6%. When this project was still owned by Nova Gold in 2011, there was a drilling that was conducted in the circled area where we intersected 35 meters at 12% copper, 170 meters at 4% copper. So we know there's significant high grade in the bornite area. And the focus for us will really be to look at bornite and how we can expand the resource and better understand the deposit going forward. We'll be looking at some field programs next year, and it's not clear whether we'll be drilling up bornite next year or not. That's still to be determined, but we're very excited about the exploration upside at bornite going forward. And we feel when you look at the Trilogy valuation, there's really no amount that's being included in the valuation for bornite. It's all really focused on the cash position that we hold and the interest that we have in the Arctic mine development. So we think there's lots of value upside. We've got a great story here. We're in the state of Alaska. We've got high grade deposits. We've got solid partnerships with South 32, NANA, and ADA. And we've got the financial ability to move these projects forward, certainly through to 2024, possibly 2025. So we're very excited about what the future holds for the company. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions that anyone may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. Very great presentation. We're going to start with Bruce Daigle. Bruce, question today for Tony. Just unmuting. Take a second. Scott,
Bruce, can you unmute yourself by pressing the microphone icon? We'll come back maybe. Oh, there you go.
Hi, Bruce.
Hello, gentlemen. Tony, that was great. I actually didn't put in a question. I had a hard time getting on here with a different iPad, but this is very impressive, and I thank you so much. We'll be talking more, I'm sure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce. We're going to move to Chesley Morton. Chesley.
Yes. First of all, great presentation. I understand you've got an upcoming memorandum of understanding with regard to the road, but what other road milestones can we expect in the near future?
Right, so the road development really falls under ADA, and as I said before, ADA is really charged with the infrastructure, the process of providing infrastructure to allow for the development of a district. So we're looking at two agreements. We're looking at expanding the memorandum of understanding, and this is Ambler Metals that's negotiating with ADA to expand that so that we can cover and hopefully commit from both ADA and Ambler Metals LLC to fund the detailed engineering component. That would be the expansion of the memorandum of understanding. And then we would look at a tolling arrangement. And so those are the main agreements that we're focused on. So the next step would really be to get working on the detailed engineering and put ourselves in a position so that once the permitting work has been carried out and we're in a position to make a decision on the development of a district and advancing the project, we can also make a decision in terms of advancing the construction of the road. And clearly that's where Ambler Metals LLC would like to be, and we're working very closely with ADA to get to that position.
Okay, and there are third parties who have claims to some significant resources on the contiguous to your property, and they're interested as well, I'm sure, in the development of the road and otherwise. Are they taking part in these discussions, or are they leaving it completely to you?
I think what the focus has been dealing with Ambler Metals LLC, primarily because the Arctic deposit is the most advanced deposit in the district in terms of being able to get it to a permitted stage and bring it into production. So the focus is very much being on Ambler Metals LLC and Arctic, but certainly, our expectation is that others that have deposits in the district or others that may stake land in the district or adjacent to the district would ultimately want to form their own relationships in terms of how they would look at the use of the road. And I want to stress that the road is a private industrial use road only, and it's meant to be used by the companies that are going to be focused on developing the mining district. It's not going to be used, it's not going to be a public road. And this is a very important point for the community that's very focused on its subsistent hunting and fishing. And so I just want to make sure that people appreciate that is the thought process behind the road.
And finally, my last question has to do with Bornite again. And South 32, your agreement with them, that does not cover Bornite, does it?
No, it does. Bornite is in the area of interest. In fact, when I pulled up that Bornite slide, and I encourage people to have a look at it, they'll see that the drilling that was done in 2017, 18, and 19, and this was funding that South 32 had provided, was very much focused on the Bornite deposit. And although I don't want to speak for South 32, I think it's fair to say that when South 32 made its initial investment by virtue of directing the funding for exploration at Bornite, it was very much focused at the Bornite deposit in terms of the size and scale and the opportunity to expand that deposit. So Bornite is in the area of interest, and we really, in many respects, haven't turned our attention to how we see Bornite fitting into the future, but it's a significant resource and it's got grade. And I think, one of the points that Doug made when he was talking about copper is that there's a scarcity factor. And one of the things that we're seeing in the mining industry, particularly as it relates to copper, is grades have come down dramatically. So the material that Escondida, which is the largest copper mine in the world, is mining now, is significantly lower grade than when it first started. And even when you look at some projects that are called high grade in quotation marks, they represent as 0.7% copper being high grade. So when we have a deposit that's 4.42% or 4.2% copper equivalent as Arctic is, or when we look at Bornite, which the cumulative inferred and a resource that we have there is about 1.6%. When you put it all together, we do feel we have very strong deposits that will merit being ultimately developed.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Jess. We're going to turn to Jeff Messeri. Jeffrey, good to have you on the call, Jeff, today. Questions from Jeff?
Yeah, okay, thank you. Hi, Tony.
Hi.
That was really great presentation, and you really have some very, very impressive copper grades there. Am I right in assuming that the production would, if you had to take a guess, would be somewhere in 2027, 2028?
Yeah, Jeff, it's really going to depend on, I'm going to answer. It's going to depend on how long the permitting is going to take.
Yes.
It's going to depend on the road construction, and it's going to depend on our ability to get into the district and hopefully not have inclement weather while we're doing the actual construction of a processing facility and the pre-strip. So I think those are the three key factors. I think your timeline's probably pretty accurate when you sort of think about a permitting horizon that in a best case scenario might be 30 months, but I think it's probably more like 36 months just based on what we've seen in the state of Alaska. That puts you into mid 2024 in terms of being able to make an investment decision. And you've got to obviously have the road constructed, and that road will be constructed in phases. And once ADA is constructed, let's say the ice road or Pioneer Road, you're in a position to be able to utilize that ice road or Pioneer Road that ADA has constructed and transport your materials and supplies into the district so that you could start the actual construction of a mine. So those are the sequences, but I think your timeline is in the right, it's about the right time period, and it factors in those three significant considerations.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And I'm assuming that you will be, when you're going to be financing this thing, you will be considering streaming the zinc and maybe the gold as well.
I think there's lots of options in terms of financing. The way the financing agreement works between South 32 and Trilogy is that each partner will finance their share of the capital associated with the project. So South 32 may have its own avenues in terms of how it wants to look at financing. I think we're open to considering a number of different options, and we haven't ruled anything out. And the thing about having a number of different metals, including gold and silver, and having I think it gives us lots of optionality in terms of looking at a number of different considerations, and I think we've got lots of flexibility at the Trilogy level to look at financing alternatives that could involve streaming. But at the end of the day, we'll just have to see what else is out there, and there's certainly offtake opportunities. There could be other financing opportunities that are available to us in terms of the debt market. So I think we're open to considering a number of different options. And now that we've got a feasibility study at a Trilogy level, and that information is being provided to Ambler Metals LLC, we're in a better position to start to have those discussions.
Okay, well, thank you very much indeed.
Yeah, I appreciate the question. Thank you and the interest.
Thank you. We'll turn to Murray. Murray Vandervelt's on the line with us.
Hi, Tony. Could you just walk us through again the timeline and the decision options to South 32 at this point?
Well, it's not so much the timeline decision options to South 32, it's a timeline decision options to both South 32 and Trilogy. So the way the JV works is the JV is a 50-50 JV. It's owned equally by ourselves and South 32. We each have two representatives on the board of the JV, and the JV management reports to the representatives that are there from Trilogy and South 32. So we approve the budgets. We effectively direct the management team in terms of the directions that we're moving forward on. So the management team is working right now on, as I said, taking the study work that was completed by Trilogy and incorporating that in terms of additional study work that's been done to start to advance the project to the next phase with a view of hopefully putting ourselves in a position to start permitting. So we expect the permitting timeline to be ballpark, as I said, 30 to 36 months. 30 might be optimistic, but 36 months based on what we've seen in the state of Alaska is definitely doable. And then from there, presuming that the permitting goes well, presuming that the study work reinforces the strong economics that we have right now. And by the way, this project continues to be robust even at lower copper and metal prices. So I think we've got lots of ability to for it to weather the storm of commodity prices decrease. So I think that will put us in a position where roughly 2024 we would be in a position to make an investment decision. That's how we're looking at the timelines at this point. And from there, it's those key points that I made before. We need to have the road to allow us to be able to have the road in. Not the complete, when I say have the road, have a road, whether it's a Pioneer Road or an ice road that allows us to be able to access the district. And that's where ADA, obviously, we will be working with ADA to arrive at an agreement that would provide for the development of that road. And then we would move into the construction phase. So that's how we're looking at it.
Okay, well, here are the questions. As I recall, ADA pays for the road and then you pay a tolling fee to reimburse them for the construction of the road. Wasn't that the original plan?
That's the plan, and that's the model that existed for Red Dog, and that's what we're looking at. So, the devil's in the details, and there's a negotiation that will happen, obviously, to put us in a position as to what the appropriate toll is for the road. If you go back to the materials that were put together on development of this district that are posted on NADA's website, this road has an operational life of 50 years. It was envisioned that it was there to open up the district, and it highlighted that there were 4 significant deposits up there: Sun, Smucker, Bornite, and Arctic. So that's got to factor into some of the discussion as we look at that. But those are discussions that Ambler Metals LLC is engaged with, working with ADA in terms of advancing that. But that is exactly the approach. The operating costs would include a toll associated with the road, and there would also be a maintenance component with maintaining the road.
Sure. So we're happy partners now, but we're 50-50. So if we get out to 24, we think we know what the environment for copper is going to be, but of course we never do. But what happens if one of you guys wants to go ahead and the other one wants to delay for a while? Then is there a negotiation to try and buy the interest of the other party out? I mean, just walk us through the options that might be available, let's say in mid-24, when one partner wants to go ahead and the other one doesn't.
Well, it's hard to speculate on what's going to happen in 2024. What I can say is that we're very focused on putting ourselves in a position so that Trilogy is able to finance its share of capital, so that when we get to the point where we make an investment decision, we're not going to be in a position where we can't fund our share of capital. So that's really going to be a focus for the Trilogy management team to look at, and that's what we're thinking about. That's what we want to put ourselves in a position to be able to do. We have a strong partnership and relationship with South 32, and we think that each party is very respectful of the other party, and I think we'll get to the right outcome. We want to see a robust project be developed. It has to be technically sound and economically sound, and based on our feasibility study, it certainly is. But a lot of work is going to be done between now and that investment decision as we work through the permitting process. And I think Murray, the real key for adding value in the district, it sure is developing Arctic, but it's demonstrating that Arctic has a potential to be have a substantially longer mine life through the incorporation of other deposits in the district that could be permitted in time to be processed through the Arctic mill. So we think there's lots of upside, as I indicated in the presentation. There's lots of exploration that we want to do in the district, and that's what we're going to be focused on. And I think if we're able to demonstrate the upside, I think it puts us in a position where copper is a very cyclical metal, and you want to be there when the prices are moving higher. But this is a robust project, even in a lower price environment. And I would encourage listeners to go to our website and look at the presentation that we put together as part of a feasibility study, which shows the sensitivity of lower copper prices, higher capital, all of those things. This continues to be a robust project. So we'll see what happens when we get there, but I'm confident that we'll be in a good position to advance this project.
All right, last question, and this is a touchier one. It would seem to me that South 32 probably is big enough and happy enough that they would be willing to go ahead with just Arctic. For Trilogy, seems to me there's a keen interest in proving up the value of Bornite to help run your stock up. In other words, get a big bump in resource reserves, because that will help you finance it. So are you guys on the same page as to how much money should be spent on Bornite in 2021? I see you wanting to show additional resources, or whether it's sunshine, Bornite, helps you more incrementally than it helps South 32. So they may want to conserve capital and just Push ahead with Arctic.
Yeah, Murray, I think we're very aligned in terms of what we want, and I think both
Sorry,
parties
can't
are
hear
very
you.
focused. Oh, I'm sorry. I said, I think we're very aligned.
Sorry,
in,
hello?
Hello?
I can hear you,
I can hear you,
Tony.
Tony, just fine.
Okay, I'm going to try again. Sorry, Murray, that you can't hear me, but I will answer the question because you asked it. We're very aligned with South 32 in terms of the exploration programs in the district. And we don't anticipate that we have different agendas in finding more resources that can be processed through Arctic, finding hopefully another Arctic in the district, and advancing Bornite. South 32 has invested $200 million in the Ambler Mining District and in Trilogy. We believe that that should be evidence to everyone of their significant commitment to developing these assets in the district. So we're confident that our interests and South 32's interests are aligned and that we're going to be working collaboratively on exploration as well as the development of Arctic and Bornite.
Thank you, Murray, for your questions. We'll turn to Stratos. Stratos, you with us today?
Yes, hi. My questions have been answered. Thanks very much for the presentation.
Thanks for being on the call, Stratos. We'll turn to Doug Loud. Doug, we did our introduction to copper today.
Yes, hi. Fascinating project description, Tony. My favorite topic is, of course, permitting. And recently, your neighbor to the south at Northern Dynasty ran afoul of the Army Corps of Engineers and the feds. And yours is quite a different situation. So could you sort of delineate the difference between the two of you so that hopefully you won't run into any of the problems that they did with the Army Corps of Engineers and what you described as having one big permit you had to get, but some little ones that didn't matter. But I've never seen a little permit that didn't matter.
Sure, and I really don't. It's not my place to talk about someone else's project, so I'm really going to not talk about someone else's project, but I'm going to talk about what we're doing. And I think what puts us in a very strong position is there's limited wetlands that we have to deal with. Certainly not similar to what others have had to deal with in the state of Alaska. We don't have we have a strong relationship with NANA, and they're going to be an important player in terms of advancing the development of the district. They have a rich mining history in terms of being associated with Red Dog, and we see and we've been working with NANA for a long time, and we see that relationship as being key to allow for the development. So we think those are the two things that really differentiate us. And then the last thing that I would say is, if I look at the size and scale, as I mentioned earlier, it's 147 acres. That is the size of the Arctic deposit, and that's a very small footprint. Now, that doesn't mean that we're not going to attract individuals that might oppose a project. And if that happens, and it normally does in North America as you go through permitting processes, we'll deal with that, and we're confident that we'll be able to deal with those issues. And that's why we're going to take the necessary time to do the work that needs to be done before we start the permitting process. So we put ourselves in the best position of avoiding any issues associated with that. So I think that's how we're sort of, considering the permitting process. It's never easy, but we feel that, we feel very confident. And we also feel that when you look at the state of Alaska and the fact that less revenue is coming in from oil and gas now, and there's been a lot less drilling in the state, I think there's a real desire to find other avenues of revenue in the state, and it has a rich mining history. And so we think that responsible mine development can certainly fit in terms of a diversification of the economy, providing jobs, revenues to the state and to the native communities where we operate. So that's how we're looking at it.
That's great, because you confirmed what I sort of thought, but I'm glad to hear you confirm it. So thank you very much, and fascinating project. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Doug. Okay, that's our questions today, Tony. I'll turn it back to you for closing remarks.
Well, as I said at the outset, I just want to thank O&M Partners for the opportunity to participate in the town hall. We're very excited about our prospects going forward. The stock has had a bit of a seesaw year this year, and I think part of that is unfortunately due to the fact that as copper prices move higher, people are focused on companies that are producers right now. But we feel, just given the quality of the projects that we have, the partnerships that we have with South 32, NANA, and ADA, we're well positioned to advance our projects. As I said throughout the presentation, we're talking about high-grade copper in the great state of Alaska, and we're well funded through 2024, possibly 2025. See how things go, and we think we've got a lot of positive catalysts that are ahead of us. Management and the board has increased their personal holdings in the company over the last 2 months, and I expect that to continue in the future. So I think we're really demonstrating that we're focused on advancing Arctic and ultimately Bornite, and that we're prepared to invest in Trilogy directly. So look forward to providing the market with updates in the future. Our ticker symbol is TMQ on the New York and Toronto Stock Exchange, and encourage you to go to our website, trilogymetals.com. Thank you very much. Thanks for your time and attention.
Thanks, Tony. Great presentation. I want to wish everyone a pleasant evening. And we'll be following up for feedback with people, and then and also any further questions, please feel free to text them in, and we'll get back to you with answers. Have a pleasant evening. Thanks again, Tony.
Yeah, welcome.